everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about tempo training. Tempos are one of my favorite training tools. I use it at all my training programs with my athletes, and unfortunately, I don't see a lot of people using them in their own training programs. So I'm going to give you the top 3 reasons that I use tempos in my training, and I'm going to teach you how to use them effectively in your training programs so that you can get better results. First of all, let's talk about what a tempo is. A tempo is basically assigning a time interval to different portions of the movement. So in a typical exercise, let's use a bench press. I have the lowering portion, which is called the eccentric. I have a pause at the bottom, which is an isometric when the bar's not moving. And then I have the upward portion, which is the concentric. And then I can also have a pause at the top, which is another isometric. So most people don't pay any attention to those phases. The only thought is, let's put some weight on the bar, let's bring it down and back up, and that's my rep. However, we can isolate specific portions of that movement and completely change the adaptations that you're going to get and make that exercise a lot more beneficial. So here's 2 different types of tempos that you'll see a lot in different training programs if you work with an experienced coach. The first type is 4 numbers, and this is a little bit more common, and this is typically, these always start with the eccentric. So the eccentric is the lowering portion of the movement. So this would be a 4-second eccentric, a 1-second isometric pause. The X means explode, so the concentric, the way up, is explosive as fast as you can, and 0-second isometric at the top, so you're not going to pause at the top. These are great because if it's written this way, you know that no matter what tempo you're reading, it's always eccentric first. However, I use a different type of tempos that are more movement-based because this gets a little confusing for people when the eccentric isn't the first portion of the movement. So I find it a lot easier for my athletes and clients to use a movement-based tempo. So I use 3 numbers, and I always start with the first portion of the movement. So for a squat or a bench press where the eccentric is first, this would be great. However, for a pull-up, this can get really confusing because the first motion of a pull-up is the upward. So in reality, for somebody who doesn't really understand tempos, if they're going to read this, they need to know that the pull-up, the concentric is first, so they actually start here. So it can get a little bit confusing. So I write them movement-based. So the first number you look at is always going to be the first thing that you do. So this would be my tempo for a pull-up. X means explode up, 2-second isometric pause at the top, 3-second eccentric on the way back down. Now if I was doing a bench press, it might look like 3-2-X. So it would be the opposite. Again, it's always going to be movement first, and it's a little bit easier to understand that way because you can just think each number correlates with each phase of a movement that I'm going to do in the sequence that I'm going to do it. The main reasons that I love tempos, number 1 is for teaching technique. If I do 10 reps of a goblet squat and I'm not paying attention to tempo and I'm just doing 10 reps, that'll probably take me somewhere between 10 to 12 seconds. So it's not a ton of time for my muscles and my body and my joints and everything to sequence properly and to learn these new movements. So if I apply a tempo that looks more like this, that gives you a lot more time as you're going down through that movement to adjust different positions, to feel what it's supposed to feel like, to develop a mind-muscle connection so I know what it feels like when my pelvis is in the right position and my abs are braced and my torso is upright. And I get to feel all these different positions, so it allows a lot more motor learning. It allows me to learn how to control my body and how to sequence different muscle actions. And all these things are happening subconsciously. Some of it I'm actually thinking of, and some of it's just happening. But the more time I spend going through these different phases and isolating and taking my time doing the movement, the more time my body has to lay down these new motor pathways and to learn this new movement effectively. So I love it for teaching technique, and it allows me as a coach to control the movement so I can actually coach things. Because if you're doing a 4-second eccentric, that gives me plenty of time to give you feedback and give you some quick cues that might help you to understand to get your head up or drop your hips back or whatever my cue is going to be. It allows me time to teach those techniques. So I love tempos for my new athletes. They're in all of my training programs for new athletes because it's a really effective way to learn new techniques. Number 2 is time under tension. So TUT stands for time under tension. If, again, let's use that same example of the 10 rep squat, and I said it was going to be about 10 to 12 seconds to do that whole set. If I had you do that at this tempo, now that's about 5 seconds per rep, 5 or 6 seconds per rep, depending on how heavy you're going. So let's say it was 5 seconds. Same set of 10 reps took me 10 to 12 seconds and took you 50 seconds. That's a lot more time under tension, a lot more time your muscles are doing work. That's going to lead to greater gains in hypertrophy, muscle building, or just burning more calories. It's more work being done. So if your goal is fitness, time under tension is a great way to create new stress and new change and new adaptation and burn a ton more calories. And if your goal is muscle building, again, time under tension is your friend. That's the goal. The more time those muscles are under tension, the more metabolic stress we're creating, and therefore, and the more mechanical stress we're creating, therefore, they're going to have to grow. So we're going to stimulate more growth. So time under tension is huge for those different types of adaptations. So it's a great thing to add into your program. And then the last one is targeting. So targeting, what I'm talking about is now isolating a specific portion of the movement to create a specific adaptation. So this might be a little bit more for an advanced athlete or an advanced trainee, but if I want to focus on a very specific type of adaptation, I can use a targeted and isolated portion of the movement to create a different stimulus. So I could use a long eccentric if I wanted specific benefits from eccentric training. I can create a targeted isometric if I'm looking for some benefits from an isometric training. So if you don't know what some of those benefits are, check out my next couple of videos because I'm going to go through my favorite benefits of eccentrics and isometrics. But I can create a more targeted stimulus by isolating different phases of movement. And again, one of the biggest things, if you're not doing this type of training, then it is a novel stimulus. New stimulus creates new adaptation. No matter what your training goal is, if you have not applied any tempos into your training, even if you go do the same exercise program that you've been doing day in and day out for a long time, you will see new adaptation. You'll burn more calories, you'll stimulate new muscle growth, you'll get a ton of new benefits by just adding some different tempos into your training program. So try adding these tempos in. Shoot me an email or leave a comment on this video if you have more questions. I'm happy to help you guys implement tempos into your training. And make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can check out more videos from me that are going to help you train safer and more effectively. Again, thanks for stopping by my video here. Thanks for checking this one out. I'm Coach PJ, Raising the Bar.